greetings. Get it? That was the film. I'd like to have, right now we're ready for a great discussion around the film. I'd like to introduce our moderator for the program, and it's going to be Stephanie Yang. Stephanie, come on down. Stephanie is a senior communications strategist and founder of Yang Communications, a tech pub PR consultancy that primarily works with venture capital startups working on artificial intelligence, digital healthcare, and the future of work. But she is not familiar with Hollywood. Hollywood is definitely in her bones. She used to be a Hollywood movie studio publicist, working on films including The Notebook, the Academy Award-winning trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, and the sports documentary, Linsanity, which is one of my favorites.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes. Welcome. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leanne. So why don't I get my panelists come down here and just take a seat. And thank you guys for staying all the way through to the very end. This is our final screening of the day and the final Q&A with our esteemed panelists. Thank you guys, thank you. So really quick bios on them before we dive right into it. On my far left is Jeffrey Lowe, a Filipino-American playwright and director. This man is great. His awards are too long to list here tonight. His plays have been produced and workshopped at Berkeley Repertory Theater, Theater Works, Silicon Valley, Bindle Stuff Studio, City Lights Theater Company, and Stanford University. Jeffrey also works as an educator and advocate for issues on DEI, and has served as a grant panelist for the Zellerbach Family Foundation, Silicon Valley Creates, and Theater Bay Area. Thank you, Jeffrey. Dr. Yvonne Kwan is the Assistant Professor of Asian American Studies in the Department of Sociology and Interdisciplinary Social Sciences at San Jose State University. She teaches classes in Asian American history and politics and Asian American representation and popular culture, among other topics. And in 2021, she was the lead organizer of the Southeast Asian American Studies Conference, and she's currently writing a book about the history and activism of AAPI changemakers in Santa Clara. Looking forward to that. And finally, Eric Toda, to my closest left, is currently the global head of social marketing at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and also the exec GM of Meta Prosper, a company program that creates economic opportunities for the AAPI community of small businesses and nonprofits. He's held a lot of big marketing leadership roles at big brands, including Nike, Gap, Airbnb, but the work he says he's most proud of is in service to us, the AAPI community. At the height of the Stop Asian Hate movement, he wrote an ad industry op-ed titled, "My People Are Dying in Silence, and I'm Here with a Megaphone," that went viral, so much so it eventually crashed the servers. Please help me welcome our panelists tonight. All right, so we just saw Shortcomings, and Ben Tanaka in this movie, played by Justin Min, is our male protagonist. And if I think about historically other Asian American or AAPI male characters, let's just, for the sake of continuity, male characters in film, I'm going to take it as early as the 80s, when we have characters like Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid. The 90s, we've got Rufio in Peter Pan, played by Dante Bosco. And then to more present day, with characters like Han Lu in the Fast and Furious franchise, Henry Golding in Crazy Rich Asians, and Wayman Wong in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yes, I know, I love him too. How is Ben Tanaka's role in this film different from all those previous on-screen characters? And I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey.
Well, yeah. I think it's cool to see. I think the clear evolution. In some ways, you see Mr. Miyagi, who using sort of the timeline that you just gave us right now. Mr. Miyagi, obviously, as much as we all love Mr. Miyagi, I think there's something about sort of like this mystic, wise, elderly, magical Asian man who's going to help the young white kid learn how to, I don't know, overcome whatever he has to overcome. And then things sort of start to progress. And I think what's really cool and interesting about Ben in this film, and sort of a big thing that I reflect upon with the film in general, is sort of how unremarkable he is, right? Where I think that when we really think about sort of the politics of being a person of color in America, a person of color in like predominantly white institutions or anything like that, there's sort of like this, like, it's either you're erased, or it's sort of this elevated, like, oh, you're special, so that's why you're here. So it's like, oh, you're special, that's why you're in this movie. You're special, that's why you made it into Hollywood. You're special, or you're magical, or you're this. And Ben's kind of just a dude. I spent a lot of my first viewing of this film being like, how did he get that apartment in Berkeley? And then I realized, we learn how it is. And I was also like, how did he park his car across from Half Price Books? Like, that's, I've gotten a ticket there. Like, that's for sure a loading zone next to Berkeley Repertory Theater. Like, I know for a fact, like, most of the tickets I've gotten are in the city of Berkeley. And so I think one thing that's really special to me is that Ben is unremarkable. And Ben, we talked about this before, Ben's kind of a jerk. For so much of the movie, save maybe like the last 5 silent seconds where maybe internally something has changed from within him. And I think it's really, it's just as important to have uplifting depictions of communities. It's really important to have historical depictions of communities, but also, I'm sure many of us have had times in our lives where we are messed up and we're at our lowest points and we're not being our best selves, and we get to watch someone be not at their best self, and that is a part of the human experience, that's part of art, that's part of storytelling. So it's really great to be able to get to a point where we have stories like this being told in unremarkable ways,
Yvonne, you're shaking your head. What's up? What do you think?
Yeah, well, for Ben, I'm also thinking about, he is squarely in this film talking about his attraction and love life and all of those things. And I think in previous films, as you've talked about the Asian American male character, right, a lot of the times it was either effeminate, sexless, a butt of the joke, like all of these jokes and all. And we're clearly still making fun of his like attraction and all of that, but in a way that is so, as Jeffrey talked about, is like so natural to all of our lived experiences, right? And that we have talked about, he was talking about Rice Kings, but yellow fever and all of that, and also the humanized aspect of that too, right? Because there is fetishization, but also and racist love, but there's also just real love, right? And mixed race families, mixed race marriages, and I think it's also dealing with the complexity of not a one-dimensional character. And in a previous call, we also talked about like Better Luck Tomorrow, and that was a film that I saw, as I was coming into adulthood, and it was like, wow, these are really shitty people, and in a quite remarkable way, right, very much remarkable way. And if anyone hasn't seen that, it's I think available out there. But in this film, really the how Ben is so unlikable, but we all know a Ben, I think. And that's the thing that is really nice to be able to see, is to naturalize, our experiences, not just as Asian Americans, but especially Asian Americans living in the Bay, too. I think we understood a lot of those jokes and the such. So I think that was what I was really kind of resonating with.
I'm glad you bring up the racist love and this very charged intersection of race and sexuality. So there's a scene in the film in the bar, right, where Ben tries to explain to Alice and Meredith the politics of intraracial dating, He describes white men dating Asian females as creepy and rice kings. But then in the same breath, he says, when you see an Asian man with a white woman, you think, good for him, good for them. You don't second guess that relationship. You're like, wow, he must be a really cool guy. She's really evolved. Eric, your wife is Jewish. How did you interpret that scene?
She also speaks Japanese too. So, fluent. Whereas I don't. And by way of background, I'm fourth generation Californian from Monterey, pre-gold rush. And so, when I saw that scene, well, first off, just as we're talking about Ben, I think Ben's impact through this movie, one, made me feel super uncomfortable. I think, he talks about a lot of uncomfortable things, but then I think those things are really important to talk about, to make you uncomfortable, to make you really think about things that probably cross through your mind a couple times here and there that no one really wants to talk about. And I think throughout those scenes, you start to really see what he's struggling with. And in that scene specifically that you're referencing, as he talks about, again, the fetishization of Asian American women, or when you look at an Asian guy with a white woman, you think something. It's not, you don't know their backstory, you don't know the context, there's this connotation between either way. And, being married to a Jewish woman, I've certainly grappled with that for sure. And the way I got to all of that was, I grew up in Moraga, which is a predominantly white town. You don't see a lot of people that look like me there. And my cousins all lived in San Francisco, and they went to Lowell, which, if you know Lowell, which is predominantly Asian. And growing up in an all-white town and going to go see them at their high school, they always called me White Eric. And they always said I wasn't Asian enough that I could go to their parties or hang out with them. And that hurt me a lot. And going back to my high school, I was always too Asian, most Asian person you've ever met. Even though I don't speak any other languages, or I try my best to assimilate, and even my own community in that school that did look like me felt that I wasn't a part of them, that I wasn't accepted. And so I like to think about my grappling with what that scene was, and I try to put myself in that situation, which I have been in many times, because he fits in this strange spectrum of ethnicity. You're not one way or another, but you're somewhere in between, and that's how I always felt until I met my wife, who's from Seattle, half from New Jersey, which is extremely Jewish. You want to know how Jewish? If you've ever been to New York, which I do love that the movie has a New York and Bay Area, again, like an undertone, because I do believe the Bay Area and San Francisco is the greatest city in the entire world. Yeah. And I was just in New York yesterday. She's so Jewish that her family owns, if you've ever been in New York, you've gotten a bagel, her family owns Essa Bagel, which is ranked number 1 or 2 in the state of New York. And so, the reason why I saw myself so much in that guy was I just kept thinking, I was like, oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. Like this, there's something that you're grappling with and that you'll figure out. And I did. I met my wife. After right in the beginning of college, and me seeing her, I asked her on a date, and I asked her, where do you want to go? And I'm assuming she's gonna say something like, I don't know, like Chipotle or Olive Garden, something like that. And she's like, no, I want to go get pho. And I was like, you want to go get pho? I was like, really? You're serious? She's like, yeah, I think it's amazing. And in that moment, I felt comfortable in my own skin, whereas before, in my past 19 years, I just did not feel comfortable. And I was like, I don't understand. And she's like, that's my favorite food. And I was like, what do you mean that's your favorite food? And we got into it, right? And throughout my journey, there was no one that ever made me feel as comfortable in my own skin and on my own journey of grappling with my ethnicity as she did. And so when I heard this, and I saw the scene where he was, saying, good for you, I was like, yeah, good for me for finding someone that made me feel comfortable in who I was and where I was, and I hope, and especially in that Randall Park scene where he comes in, he's like, well, I just personally see people for who they are. You know, that's absolutely true. And so, you know, I saw a lot of my own story in Ben's, but also I also was hopeful for him that he would understand eventually that, you know, he has to let go of a lot of those uncomfortable thoughts that honestly don't drive a lot of the relationships that you see that are mixed race.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I too was reading that scene and took it very personally and shared it with my white boyfriend, who had never heard the term Rice King. And I saw it through the lens of him, and that quote where Meredith says, I don't think it's about anything, I think it could just be about love. Like, I felt that resonated with me. But let's talk about Ben and this very complex character, right? So I'm gonna read some reviews that I pulled up online about the film. The film he's so unlikable, it makes you hate the movie, okay? Here's another one from the New York Times. Ben's moping and griping are unearned, lobbed like wet blankets at anyone trying to actually do something with their lives, like his girlfriend Miko or his best friend Alice. And then here's another one by Dave Nguyen. Loved it, so refreshing. Right, so there's this big spectrum, right? And I wonder, is Ben's personality a consequence of his experience of otherness that Eric alludes to, right? This genuine struggle that AAPIs and other people of color truly we grapple with here in the US? Or is Ben really just a miserable man-child? Jeffrey?
What's so wild about those reviews, I'm not surprised about that spectrum of reviews, but what is so wild is setting aside his personal life and his issues, like Woody Allen got away with that his whole career. Noah Baumbach, for an extent, is doing the same thing, and why are they lauded? Mm-hmm. But Ben is a whiny man-child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. We're hearing snaps in the back.
I'm not going to elaborate. The snaps mean they know the answer.
Yeah. Yvonne, I know part of your research is about social trauma, even trauma that never gets articulated or vocalized, but yet it still surfaces in other ways. Do you think Ben, in some ways, is acting out because of this, like the way that he has to toe the line and sort of shapeshift with all these different people that in trying to live up to expectations?
I mean, I don't think it's just Ben. I mean, you can see that with Alice as well, right? Especially at the end when she's like, I'm gonna quit grad school because that's what my parents wanted me to do, and it's just not serving me anymore. And I think that takes such like bravery too, to admit that, like, because I don't know if anyone has ever gone through a PhD program or grad school stuff. It's like not for the faint of heart, And for Ben, he also dropped out of film school, right? And I think there's a lot there where there are these pressures, and we saw in our earlier films, especially the short films today, about parental pressures. And I think a lot of that kind of resonates within the film itself. It's also, part of it is in Berkeley, literally near UC Berkeley, right? And in the book itself, if you read it, it's Alice is going to Mills now, no longer there. I mean, it's the institution is there, but not Mills itself, but right? And so there's just so much of this, I think, kind of model minority baggage there. And also what's great about this juxtaposition is that you have Miko and also Ben who are pursuing the arts. And it is something that is like very much lauded and all of that. But in certain circles, right? Like not all of our family members might be so supporting of that. And if you're successful, great. If you're like the next actress or actor in Crazy Rich Asians or the director or producer of that, great. But unless you can almost like reach that level, I think, of fame and success and whatnot, it's always seen as, just not good enough. And that's something that Ben perhaps was always trying to strive for. I was actually thinking, I think you chuckled when he was writing, and then he would delete, and then he was writing, and and it wasn't even real writing, right? He was just like...
He kept going between interior and exterior. That's all he was doing. And I just couldn't stop laughing at that.
Yeah, so I think it's just a lot of those kind of internal pressures there. And they bring up when Alice and Ben are also talking about incarceration versus internment, right? I love those little pieces there where like if you don't really know, you don't really understand the subtext enough there, but if you are in the know, you're like, I have read,
I actually love that you bring up that that they drop out and they pursue creative arts, most because again that's another part of the movie that really resonated with me. I dropped out of a top 25 law school to pursue a career in marketing, and my parents still don't understand what I do. And so I think that is such a big thing, just because again it breaks this cycle, it breaks these pressures, and it introduces different paths for again younger audiences watching that. Oh, I could go do that. Maybe not be as bad as a person as Ben is, but that there is other paths for you.
Let's step back away from this film then, and then talk about in terms of making different paths for the new vanguard in terms of creating more opportunities for AAPI storytelling and lived experiences. And so, Jeffrey, you're a playwright and a director. I wonder if you're in a position of influence or power where you can actually write more roles that cast AAPI actors.
Kind of. I think yes and no. I think that with the writing, yes, I do find myself in a position, both with my role as a director and as a casting director, maybe a little bit more, to sort of cast in a lens with the lens of I try to describe my approach as sort of identity conscious casting, and stepping away from like obviously whitewashed casting, but also stepping away from a lot of people would call like colorblind casting. Because I step away from colorblind casting where I'm like, oh, cool, like, so we're just erasing it. Like, but for me, I'm just like, what is everyone's different identities, be it their ethnic background, their sexuality, their socioeconomic background, any number of things in the storytelling, what does that do to the story that we're telling? So what does it do, like what we watched with Shortcomings was just a breakup story, right? But what does it mean that these people were Asian American? What does it mean that this Asian American person is with this white person? What does it mean that this white person that's vaguely indigenous, Elizabeth, I don't know who that person was, but like, so it's like thinking about what those things mean. So I'm in a position there to like be able to ask the question why in a lot of the rooms that I'm in when I'm casting shows and I'm directing shows, to be like, but what does it mean when this person's there, and why do we want it to be this person? And also in the writing, I think it goes both ways, where I've had the opportunity to write a lot of Asian American, Filipino American characters. I had this play once where I did a workshop of this lovely two-hander that I'd been working on for a long time, where it's this friendship between this white American and Filipino American young person from ages 12 to 40. And we did a workshop of the play, and there was a person who in the audience was like, his feedback was, well, why does he have to be Filipino? I don't know why he has to be Filipino. There's nothing about the play that makes him have to be Filipino. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know, I kind of made him Filipino because I felt like it. And I think that you're saying that he doesn't have to be Filipino because there wasn't like, anything like in the food that he ate, or the accent that he had, or anything in his background that made him have to be Filipino. And actually there were things, it's just very subtle, that you didn't get. But if I'm being honest with you, I'm Filipino, and I spend many days where me being Filipino doesn't occur to me. Usually what it is, I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, look in the mirror, I'm like, still brown, and that's the end of it. That's the extent of what that is for that day. There are many days where it does come up. There are many days where it is a part of my life, but there are also days when it doesn't. And maybe you're watching a play where it doesn't really come up for this person. And I think that's similar, again, to the movie we saw today, and hopefully the next steps is it doesn't have to be the justifier of things. It doesn't have to be oh, prove to me why we need to put these Asian people on stage. Prove to me why these Asian people have to be in this film. It's like, oh, maybe because they're human beings and they have souls and they have spirit, and that's what we're here to do.
We have time for a few Q&A questions from the audience. If anyone has one, just you in the back there, feel free to just, oh, they're running a mic to you. There you go.
Hello, this is my third time speaking, but my name is Simi, and I actually just wanted to comment. The film was fantastic, and as someone who is an actor and actually works at, or has done shows at Ohlone College, we have hosted a lot of Jeffrey's plays. I just want to say, as a testament to his work, there have been a lot of opportunities for South Asians, Southeast Asians, and East Asians in all of his plays. They've always been very color conscious and accessible, and so thank you for the work that you do and for continuing that.
Thanks for that comment. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, think about it as I oh, you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, the volunteer photographer wanted to say something. I really like, it's more of a commentary, I really like how you're able to portray the characters in a very authentic way. I really appreciate that, because it got me thinking throughout the whole entire time. It's like, how many times have I been that miserable guy? But it's actually allowed me a lot of reflection and growth, so I really just want to say a quick thank you to helping me process that as a panel. Thank you.
Wow. You're very welcome. That's what we're here for. Anyone else, guys? All right, take. Oh yes. Okay. Yes.
So I have a quick question. When are we going to start seeing more stories? When are we going to start seeing more stories of multicultural kids? Because I work with a lot of kids, and they don't identify as Asian. They're half Korean, half Italian. They're half this. I've got kids who are 20 years old, and I ask them, "What are your friends? You know, how do they relate if they're half Korean and half Italian?" And they go, "Mom, you just don't get it. We don't look at ourselves that way. We are who we are, and those are our stories, and we're not tied to your boxes and the stereotypes of being an Asian or a guy or a girl, whatever." And you know, I'm working with some young people now to create their stories, and it is not about their race and their color. It is about the issue of someone being cyberbullied, somebody being raped by their sister, their mother's boyfriend, right? And it's a universal issue. And that's what these kids want to hear about. They don't want to hear about kind of our generation, you know, the boxes that the white guys put us into and makes us defined by their numbers. They're saying, screw that shit, okay? We're who we are and deal with our issues. Because we don't relate to some of these issues you're talking about. And that's what we're waiting to see, is their voices, their stories, their issues. How is AI going to affect them when someone's going to transpose their face on somebody's body and it's going to show up? Because they're going to bear the brunt of this stuff. So that's what we're waiting to see, is we want to hear their voices. We want to get to that next generation. I don't care if I'm a first, second, third generation from Taiwan or whatever. You know, I'm half this, I'm a quarter this, I'm a third this. Filipinos are, hell, you got a Spanish last name and you're all mixed up, right? So let's hear those stories. When are those stories coming out? That's what I'm want to ask you.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw it to Yvonne and Eric, both of you. Yvonne, you teach the younger generation.
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts about that. It's folks like Jeffrey who are working with the younger generations in developing those stories, but also I think it's, I don't want to dismiss what you just said, but also I work with a lot of young people too who don't know what their histories are, however mixed up that it may be, and a lot of times it's that not knowing that creates also a vacuum until there are opportunities for them to learn about the larger histories. How even though you may not identify as this or that or whatever, when other people look at you, they already may have perceptions about who you are, who your family is. As we're just watching this, a white person and an Asian person being together has very different connotations depending on the various genders too, right? And so one is to definitely work with our young people to give them resources, opportunities to create the narratives, to create those films, but also not just kind of erase all that history and just pretend it's all colorblind and all of that. It's not, I don't think that's what you're saying, right? But is to understand that there's complexity in mixed raceness too, right? And I've worked with others before who have mixed race children, and they're like, you know what? You're 100% Asian and 100% white. It's not half this or half that. You're both, right? And so I think it's to really learn and then also develop the narratives from what